Hello, everyone. This is Dorie Clark, and we are here with our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better, where we speak with authors, with business leaders, and other great thinkers about ways to improve your life on an everyday basis. And today's guest is Caleb Gardner. Caleb is the author of a new book that came out last August. It's called No Point B. And let me give you the killer subtitle here. No Point B, Rules for Leading Change in the New Hyper-Connected, Radically Conscious Economy. We're going to parse all of that. Caleb Gardner, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so fun to be here with you.
Amazing. We're so glad to have you here. And hello to everyone who is tuning in and joining us live. Please feel free to type into the chat box and let us know who you are and where you are dialing in from. And we will also be taking your questions for Caleb throughout. So please feel free to plug them in. Now, Caleb, one of the things that we have in common is a background in politics. And I know for multiple years, you were the head, while President Obama was in office, you were the head of digital strategy for his online arm, political advocacy arm, Obama for America. Now, these days you are doing consulting for organizations, for-profit and non-for-profit, but that's a pretty formative experience running political advocacy and trying to steer that ship. So I'm actually curious, as you think about how, the lessons that you have derived from that. I mean, this is kind of being, right in the thick of the fire here. What did you learn about digital strategy and how to steer public opinion when you were doing it at the presidential level? How, in other words, how do we manipulate the masses, Caleb? What do we need to know?
Oh, I wouldn't go as that far. I'll just say we were manipulating anyone, but I do think that we were, it's funny because coming into working for the president, I came from a more for-profit background. I was coming from Edelman, working on Fortune 500 brands and, really kind of convincing them to open Facebook pages back in the day. Now I'd probably be trying to convince them not to, but that's a whole other story. But I was able to bring in some of this knowledge of, managing these accounts at scale and really brand building to something that had already had a lot of success. I joined the president's team in 2013. So they were coming off of the 2012 campaign. The 2012 campaign was really formative in terms of social media and how it affected politics. So I felt like I was really standing on the shoulders of giants and lots of smart people who had come before and helped the president build this digital infrastructure that I then just got to be a part of and kind of take over and innovate in new and different ways. One of the ways that I feel like we did that is applicable to the work that I'm doing today is we really put an emphasis on digital organizing as it relates to policy making, as it relates to governing. So we didn't just have these big megaphones of the Barack Obama accounts, though obviously those were important. We also had state-based accounts. We also had volunteer accounts. We had this distributed infrastructure of people who were helping us make change, helping us, help enact the president's agenda every day. And I think that approach of messaging, and strategy from the top and organizing, listening to people from the ground up is something that, really was influential for me and is something that I have brought into the work that I'm doing now.
That's great. Thank you very much. We're here with Caleb Gardner. He's the author of the new book, No Point B. This is Dorie Clark in our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. And we want to say hi to some of our amazing guests tuning in from around the world. Cheryl is back from Minneapolis, St. Paul. We've got Peter back in Edinburgh. We've got Russell is in Calgary. Carolyn's here from North Carolina. Tom is joining from Hamburg, Germany. Sandy's in Dublin. Wow. We've got Paulina in Cleveland, Haley in Dallas. We're so glad to have all of you and more. Now, Caleb, something that I'm curious about, a lot of times I think people misconstrue digital strategy as just literally like, oh, make some TikTok videos or something really super tactical. You were talking about digital strategy at a much higher level. What does it look like at a high level to think about digital strategy and how, as an organization, you can be deploying that effectively?
Yeah, well, I think there's some misconceptions that when we talk about digital strategy, one, that it's something that younger people naturally do better. I think that in lots of ways, younger people are more digitally native and more have a better ear for good content. than a lot of older generations like me. I, for one, am really glad that TikTok was not as prominent when I was running social media for the president, didn't have to worry about it. But now, I think this is a generation that is used to remixing content, building on each other, building on each other's ideas in super interesting ways. That's the most fun thing about TikTok for me as just a user. But I think that there is some value in being able to connect it to a larger strategy, whether that's a larger business strategy, or for us, when I was working for the president, the larger, political and policy goals. And I also think that there is value in being able to look at kind of the arc of history of technology and say, what does this mean about us as humans, that we've been given this kind of power to organize at this scale, that we've been given this power to communicate at scale? And what are the implications for how we should be responsible with that power, and where we should think about where we are contributing to a larger ecosystem that is either becoming toxic or becoming something that, organizes people towards something more positive. And so people who work in digital strategy today have this weird responsibility to connect it back to an older kind of bureaucratic infrastructure of a larger organization, while having their ear to ground about what's new and hot and fun, while trying to say, like, what are the things that aren't going to change? What does this say about us as humans that we are even drawn to this, so that they can forecast a little bit about where it could go in the future? It's a really hard mix of lots of different kinds of skill sets, but it's really fun and interesting and kind of keeps you on your toes. That's why I've always been attracted to it.
That's great. Thank you very much. This is Dorie Clark with Newsweek. This is our weekly interview show, Better, and we're here with our guest, Caleb Gardner. He's the author of the new book, No Point B. If you're enjoying the conversation, hit the like button, hit the share button, so that your friends can benefit from it as well. We want to say hi to Zeke. He's tuning in from San Benito, Texas. Francis is in Bogota. We've got Elna from Milan. We have a LinkedIn friend from Ottawa. Umberto is here from Guadalajara. Cheyenne is in Iran. Andy is joining from Toronto. Hey, Andy. I just talked to him yesterday. Jira is from DRC. I think that's Congo. Hey, man, good to have you here. Sushma's in India. We love having all of you type your questions for our friend Caleb Gardner into the chat box, and we'd love to hear them.
Of the audience. That's so fun.
I know we have the best audience. These are great folks tuning in, and they ask great questions too. So, Caleb, one thing, before we dive into audience questions that I'm curious about, you have a chapter in your book, No Point B, and you say the chapter is called "The Internet Makes Change Harder and Easier." Can you explain to us this paradox and what you mean by it? How do the internet and change relate to each other?
Yeah, the conversation around the benefits of the internet and social media in particular tend to go into this binary of either it is going to revolutionize how we do everything, and technology, people get really excited about the future and thinking about what's possible. And, there's this techno optimism strain, which assumes that everything about technology is good and innovation for its own sake is good. To the point where it becomes almost like a religious fervor in some sectors where they believe in technology that hard. And then you've got the opposite end, where you've got this kind of Luddite strain of technology is ruining everything, social media has ruined everything, and we should all unplug and delete our accounts, and et cetera, et cetera. And there's some pretty prominent thinkers who have argued for that line of thinking. I take a lot more nuanced approach. I think that there has been a lot of evidence in the last few years that technology for its own sake is not necessarily good, that the companies that run a lot of the technology that runs our lives are, ultimately trying to make money, trying to figure out new revenue streams, don't always have their users' best interest in mind, and don't always have the unintended consequences of how technology affects society in mind, and don't design for that first. And so the Luddites have a lot of proof points to be able to point to about how social media and technology has ruined our lives. But also the optimists have a lot of things to point to about, how it's made medicine better, how it's made organizing better. We were just talking about organizing more easily, and it's helped marginalized communities in a lot of ways be able to organize. It's helped people have a voice in countries that were oppressed before, didn't have outlets. There is we can look at what's made it better and still critique how it could be better. And I think that was the point that I was making is, if we are looking to make any kind of change, whether that's community-driven change, whether it's organizational change, we have to operate within a system that is not perfect, that does need to be critiqued itself and made better. But similar to democracy, which is also a system within which we operate that is not perfect, or capitalism, a system within which we operate, which is definitely not perfect, we can make the system itself better, more equitable, more inclusive, safer for marginalized communities, while using those tools to advance goals that are more progressive and inclusive, et cetera, et cetera. We have to both individualize what we are trying to accomplish and take a step back and look at the system itself and how it can be better.
Yeah, that's great. Caleb Gardner is here. He's the author of the book No Point B. This is Dorie Clark. And Caleb, we have some great questions that are coming in from our audience. And Annette has one. She's in Southern California. She wants to know, how do you fuse the various perspectives, content, strategy, and the aspects of power, fun, and responsibility? I mean, basically, the work that you're doing with digital strategy is at the intersection of a lot of different areas. You have to be almost a kind of Renaissance person to be good at it. And I can imagine it would be a little bit challenging because you really have to hone the skills of a generalist. How do you think about balancing all of those things?
Yeah, what a great question, Annette. I mean, I would say that you're totally right that people who work in digital strategy have to fuse together a lot of different kinds of skill sets that historically had been a little bit more siloed. I think the one thing that has been true in my career as I've worked with people who like to lean in on the future and lean in on how do we use technology to make things better, is that they have a natural curiosity to, what does this mean? What does TikTok mean for how we communicate? What does the iPhone mean for how we buy things? They're really interested and tend to lean in on just trying things and experimenting and getting things wrong. And I think that if I were to kind of put a bow around what makes a good digital strategist, I really think it's the ability to see into the future, try things, make the case for change within an organization that may not want to try things or may want more proof points, constantly be educating people, that you report to, and educating people that report to you about kind of best practices. It takes a lot of that change management type skill set to bring an organization along with you. And I think that's what makes it really fun, though, because you are constantly like having to learn new things. And as a naturally curious person myself, I find that really fun and interesting, and it keeps me on my toes. So if you find that kind of thing fun and inspiring, I think that's how you mix in the like what's frustrating about it with, what's fun.
That's terrific. I'm Dorie Clark. This is our guest, Caleb Gardner, author of the book No Point B. We want to say hi to some of our amazing friends tuning in from around the world. We've got Christoph in Poland. We've got David in Brazil. Minu is in North Carolina. Guy is in South Africa. Hi to Vahida from UAE. Emmanuel's here. We've got Nafisa from Iran. DT is in Rochester. And yes, I did get your book. Thank you, DT. Madeline's in Erfurt, Germany. Essam is in the UAE. Luca's in Milan. Fazil is joining also from UAE. Very good showing, UAE. We are impressed with you this week. So we love having all of you here, and some great questions have come in, Caleb. We want to highlight some of them. Anna wants to know about innovation. Peter Drucker once remarked, "Innovate or die." We have all kinds of changing circumstances here, but I am curious, especially with digital strategy. This is a place where I think you probably have to really thread the needle between going for the next new thing, the next big thing, and jumping on it so you're not too far behind, but also recognizing you can't jump on everything. And there are also evergreen structural principles you need to be following. How do you actually figure out what the right balance is so that you're not wasting all of your energy and efforts on, oh my gosh, Google Plus, let's do that? How do you think about all these things?
Throwback. Anna, this is exactly the right question to ask, and this is exactly the right question that every leader should be asking, I believe, because the point that I make in No Point B, the whole reason it's called No Point B, is that we have to be constantly changing, and we have to be building an organizational capability to constantly be doing things differently, and that when we see that as a core competency and not something that we just do every once in a while, we become a lot better as an organization at trying new things, at integrating new data points, at changing our jobs and training our new workforce. We become a lot more adaptable and able to innovate. So I absolutely believe that we have to innovate or die, just like Peter Drucker said. But I think what happens is that we tend to outsource innovation. We tend to make skunkworks teams, or we tend to have people who, it's their job to innovate and the rest of us are just kind of doing business as usual. I think that's the wrong way to think about innovation. Yes, we have to be making investments on different time horizons, right? Like we need to be protecting our core business while trying new things, while trying to do moonshots or things we're not sure are going to work. Like we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket of something and gamble the whole business. Of course not. But we need to be able to adapt faster when things are working and be able to pull those things through and teach people how to do their job differently faster than most of us are doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. We have Caleb Gardner, author of No Point B. If you're enjoying this conversation, hit the like and hit the share button. You can learn more about Caleb and his book at calebgardner.com. And if you want to make sure you never miss one of our weekly Newsweek interview shows, just go to my website. It's dorieclark.com. You can sign up, download a free self-assessment. You will join our email list and you'll get reminders about things like this. Now, a great question, Caleb, came in from Guy. He is asking the question everybody's been talking about for the past month. He wants to know, what do you think about ChatGPT-3? AI is taking over, right? So what does this mean? And how will they affect the content writing industries? For anyone who has been in marketing, in advertising, in branding, in social content creation, all of a sudden we have a tool that actually does a pretty decent job, sometimes an even more than decent job, at creating the things that were so painstakingly crafted by very well-educated humans. What do you make of all this?
Yeah, and my wife teaches art, so we actually have talked about this on the generative art side as well, which is having a huge impact. And so as a writer, I have thought a lot about the impact of ChatGPT and experimented with it a little myself, like seeing like, okay, I want to write a blog post about this topic. How well can ChatGPT do that? What we found is that it does it almost as well as a typical, let's say, average writer can do. There are factual inaccuracies that it's still pulling through that you have to gut check. There's obviously like, you have to make sense of the idea. Like, is it saying things that make sense? Is it pulling it through the entire way? I think for the most part, it does. It's very impressive. I think what's interesting is to think not about it replacing the writing process or replacing it completely. I think it's interesting to think about it, at least right now, from it solving a little bit of the blank page problem. Like me, when I sat down to write my book and was staring at, like, okay, I've got to write a chapter on this topic. I've got my outline, like sometimes it's like pulling teeth when you're trying to write. Like it is painful. Like sometimes it just flows and sometimes you're like, what do I even want to say here? And I think what ChatGPT could do in those situations is actually get you a solid first draft, or something that is a more workable outline than you could have come up with yourself. And then you can play around with that idea. You can mold it like clay and make it your own. I think there is a danger of losing your own voice if you rely too much on the AI's voice. So that's something to consider. I also think there's a danger of us losing the ability to work with the blank page and what that forces our brain to do in terms of creativity. Like if we're only relying on regenerated ideas, which is really what ChatGPT is, right? Like it's learning from all of us and then it's kind of regenerating from that. Where does originality play in? And do we start to lose that spark of originality if we're leaning too hard on, somebody solving that blank page problem for us? So maybe in the future, it will completely replace some, especially short bits of writing, like you pointed out, marketing content, for example, where you really only have to write a few sentences and you want to get it out and you don't have to sit down and write it yourself. From what I've seen, it's still not, it doesn't quite meet the threshold of being creative enough, I think, to do that well, but I think it'll get there. But I think it's going to take a lot longer to get to the longer form, like really replacing a voice of a person who's trying to write something longer. But I'm definitely paying attention to it. I think it's super interesting. I'm trying not to be threatened by it as a writer. And I think when I've, seen other people talk about it too, they're trying to figure out how to incorporate it into their process, or at least understand it. So, we'll see. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely following ChatGPT 3 very closely as well. And we want to say hi to our amazing viewers tuning in. We've got Bree from Knoxville. We've got Gail in North Carolina. We've got Adam in the great Washington, D.C. And Claudio's tuning in from Argentina. We love having every single one of you here. We're here with Caleb Gardner, author of No Point B. And some great questions are coming in, Caleb. We have one that has come in from Francis that wants to know about digital strategy as regards to small companies. If you are the owner of a small firm and you're trying to think about digital strategy, often we might imagine, a big Fortune 500 company, their digital strategy is going to be so extensive. They're going to be on every platform. They're going to have paid advertising. They're going to have the ability to do anything and everything. But if you are a person that is running a business and it is not a Fortune 500 company, clearly you need to be doing something digital. But how do you actually triage and identify ways to figure out what you should and shouldn't be doing? How does it play out for smaller businesses?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of these questions over the years from people who are small business owners who are friends of mine or potential clients, or, people that, again, like you said, don't have the resources of a larger company. And a couple of things that I always tell them. One is that focus on the things that have the most value for you. Don't spread yourself too thin. One of the mistakes that I find is that people try to do everything at once. They try to, they have their website, but then they also try to launch a newsletter, and they try to be on every social account possible, and they try to run ads, and and really all those things could be good, but not all of them are going to have the same amount of value. Like if you think of the Pareto principle of, 20% of your efforts brings 80% of your value. We'll find what 20% are for you, and then focus on those things, and make it be okay that you don't, as a small business, have an active Twitter presence, right? Like there's things where you can make compromises, and it's totally okay. Don't spread yourself too thin. And then related to that, I would say that when you find that 20% of things that really work for you, there are ways that you can automate them, that you can, find tools that let you manage multiple things at once. So you don't have to spread yourself too thin just from a content management standpoint. Maybe one day ChatGPT will actually be one of those tools that you lean on to create things for you, because you don't have the time to be super creative or always doing your own copywriting. Who knows? Microsoft is actively talking about building that into a lot of their products right now, which I think is a really interesting development. But for now, you've got things like HubSpot, you've got things, that are basically a suite of tools that allow you to do multiple different things, build all your analytics and your management of content into one place. So you don't have to, really be doing a lot over in multiple different places. So, as a small business owner, your most precious resource is your time. I know you know this. So protect it and, focus on the things that really matter to you.
Yeah, that's terrific. Caleb Gardner, author of No Point B, is here on our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. I'm Dorie Clark. Now, you were touching a moment ago, Caleb, on something that I wanted to go deeper into, which is the importance of newsletters. This is something that is not considered particularly sexy these days because it is certainly not new. But I know that this is one of the drums that you like to beat. I agree with you. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about email newsletters and what the role of them is?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most powerful tools that there are. I've thought that for a long time, for the simple fact that, we were talking earlier about what's human about the different tools and how we apply them. If you think about what we say when we subscribe to an email newsletter, we're basically inviting someone into a very private digital space, which is our inbox. Almost every other digital experience is very public, like every time you post something on social or every time you're, sharing something, that is an act of coming into a public space to have a conversation. Whereas when you're subscribing to something, you're saying, I see value in this thing. I want to invite it into a private space. It's almost the difference between going out to coffee with one of your friends and having a back and forth conversation versus inviting them into your house, where there's an expectation of intimacy. There's an expectation of asks that can be made of each other. There's an equity trade-off. So I think that the reason why email has continued to be valuable is that you can make more direct asks. I mean, there's a reason why we made so much money off our email program, but not so much our social program. But our social program helped build our email program, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say that the other thing that has made email newsletters in the last few years really popular is that there are new audience building tools that allow you to monetize those email newsletters, like Substack, et cetera, that have made email not just a channel, but its own audience or its own community around that email newsletter. And journalists have been able to take advantage of that, for example, to basically build their own tiny newsroom where they've got back and forth with an audience. They've got an audience that's contributing monetarily because there's new tools to be able to contribute monetarily. And they can really go deep on a niche subject matter. So I'm still bullish on them. I think that email is a place that has needed innovation for a really long time. And I still think there's lots of things we can do to be more innovative to both as emailers and people who receive email.
Yeah, amen to that. That's great. We're here with Caleb Gardner, author of No Point B. We have amazing friends tuning in from around the world, like Diana from gorgeous South Carolina, Telma from Brazil, Dawit is here from Ethiopia. We love having every single one of you. We're here every Thursday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, 5 o'clock in London. Now, Caleb, in your book, No Point B, you actually lay out 9 principles for the next generation of leaders. We're short on time, so I certainly won't ask you to name all 9, notably also because I know from personal experience, having written my books, remembering the 9 principles, like you wrote that a long time ago. That's a lot for a pop quiz. But can you share 1 or 2 with us that you think are some of the most important that we need to be keeping in mind if we want to be successful leaders in the digital age?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones that you called out was just, building an appropriate box for the internet and technology in general as being change makers. But the other one that I will point out that is related to that actually is the importance of narrative. As organizers in the political space, we talk about narrative a lot in terms of how we talk about ourselves, how we talk about the issue, how we talk about how we all have to do this together and we all have to pitch in, and creating a theory of change for why you doing this specific action is going to contribute to this larger outcome. These are all things that we think about on an individual basis as we're talking to people. And our job was to translate those to a larger content strategy that could tell that story over time through thousands of pieces of content about specific issues. And as business leaders, big and small, we have those tools to be able to create that narrative now. But it takes a lot of effort and intentionality. And it takes a lot of pulling through, really, really being settled on what your story is, and then pulling that through in big and small ways through lots of pieces of content. The other underappreciated part of it that I call out in the book is that we need to be doing that for the people who work for us too. We need to be telling the story to our own employees, our own team members, our own people in our community, because they actually, we often just underappreciate how much they need to be persuaded we're moving in the right direction too, or how much what they're doing matters to that larger mission. We put all of this effort into external communication, and we often underappreciate how much internal communication is going to keep us all rowing in the same direction. We need to build that narrative for our own people just as much as we're building it for all our external stakeholders.
Such an important point. We have been here with Caleb Gardner. He is the author of the new book. It came out just last year. It's called No Point B. And you can learn more about Caleb. Check out his book. Check out his work at calebgardner.com. Caleb, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been an amazing conversation. Love the audience from all over the world and want to keep in touch with many of you. So please do reach out.
That's wonderful. I'm Dorie Clark. This is Better, our weekly Newsweek interview show. Thank you to Caleb Gardner. Thank you to all of you for tuning in, and we will see you next Thursday. Take care.